What's up, guys? It's MMA here, out of my hiatus because the best pound for pound fighter in the world, Islam Makhachev, is fighting this weekend against Dustin the Diamond Poirier at UFC 302. And today I was actually going to make my Paulo Costa Sean Strickland breakdown, but something came over me, and I just feel like I've got to talk about this Islam Makhachev Dustin Poirier matchup first instead. And there's a number of things that I want to say about it. Obviously, you can tell just by looking at the profile picture for my account, I was probably going to pick Islam Makhachev to win this fight. That's not really a surprise. But I do want to say that this is not a gimme fight for Islam. This isn't just like an easy, free title defense that he's being gifted. And there are a number of things that you can smell on the air for Dustin Poirier to have chances of being a live underdog. Let's start off with the fact that Islam Makhachev doesn't have much tape against southpaws, and some of the most notorious tape of that is him leaping in with a left hand against Adriano Martins and getting clipped and getting the only loss of his entire career. So obviously, when he's in a matchup with a southpaw, there's going to be some problems. And it goes a little bit deeper than that, because even in the matchups that he's won against southpaws, I would still say that you're seeing a different Islam Makhachev, a more reluctant and less pressure-oriented Islam Makhachev. You can see that, again, even in fights that he wins, like the Drew Dober fight, for example, he's not super pressure-heavy on the feet. Not in the same way that you might see him be in the fight with Alexander Volkanovski, either of those ones, or even against Charles Oliveira. But when you look at Islam Makhachev against Gleison Tibau, you can see some hopeful things, as he has a much more educated entry than those that he was using against Adriano Martins, similar in how he used the level change to close distance with the left hand, but much more successful. And against Gleison Tibau had a huge degree of success as he managed to score the knockdown in that fight. But it goes deeper than that too. You could look at the fact that Dustin Poirier, while obviously there was signs of really, really poor fight IQ and pulling those guillotines against Benoit Saint Denis, did have better mechanics on trying to finish those guillotines than he did in a lot of his other fights, and did get really close on a couple of those attempts to actually finishing the guillotine. But outside of that, what does Dustin Poirier need to do to win this fight? And the problem that exists there, and like I said, is Dustin Poirier capable of winning this fight? Yes, 100%. You could see him have success with things like, for example, the Poirier shift. And I've seen people on Twitter discussing Volkanovski's shifting attacks as well, and how those could interact. And obviously, there's differences with being an orthodox fighter and shifting into southpaw, as opposed to being a southpaw fighter and shifting into orthodox. And also, Volkanovski and Poirier use them in different scenarios, so they don't apply one-to-one. But I think that there is merit in bringing them up, because you did see Volk stumble Makhachev with that technique when they fought against each other in their first fight. So there is some relevance there, and it's kind of a double-edged sword too. I'm not sure how to take it, because on one hand, you will have Makhachev having some experience inside the octagon with a similar shifting sort of striker in Volkanovski, although Poirier has, again, a fundamentally different way of executing his shift from Volkanovski. But you also have Khabib having already had a camp for Dustin Poirier, who is in Makhachev's camp and corner for this fight. So that's an interesting dynamic there as well. But Dustin Poirier has two ways of winning this fight, and they're both just finishing Islam Makhachev. He either has to catch him on the feet and finish him, or he has to somehow snatch up a submission against Islam Makhachev. And the reason that I say that those are the only ways that he can win this fight are because, and obviously I've been wrong for this before, I said that there was no way Strickland could beat Izzy by decision. It would have to be by knockout, and that ended up not being true at all. He managed to just pitch a masterclass shutout. So I could be proven wrong again. It's always possible. But the main thing is that Dustin Poirier's cagecraft is not at the level that it needs to be to beat someone like Islam Makhachev if he's fighting at his best and doesn't get caught by something. What do I mean by that? So, if Dustin Poirier fights this fight like how he does against almost everybody, where he gives up the center of the octagon in the face of pressure so that he can try and strike with his back to the cage, he will lose to Islam Makhachev. Unless he catches him or something, and that's the thing. But if he doesn't, then with his back to the cage, while he's good striking from there, Islam Makhachev is going to have an easy time taking him down. And the reason Dustin Poirier seems okay with surrendering takedowns at that point in the octagon is because he feels like the cage being there can help him get back up, which is true. But if you're going against a chain wrestler the level of Islam Makhachev, who isn't going to be discouraged by you getting up either, who's just going to try and take you down afterwards, you'll see what Khabib was able to do to him as well. Just get him there, take him down, smother him, ground and pound him, look for submissions if they're there. If he gets up, return him again. And that game plan worked for Khabib. A version of that game plan even worked for Charles Oliveira, whose wrestling wasn't on the level to be able to get Dustin Poirier down, and who struggled in striking exchanges with Dustin Poirier throughout the earlier stages of that fight. But when he did shoot against the cage, he was able to find back exposure, get onto Dustin Poirier's back, and ultimately lock up a submission. The reason he was able to do that is because of some quirks of Dustin Poirier's submission defense, how he hand fights, and getting into it in this video isn't necessary for the purposes of discussing it, because I think we all kind of understand that when it gets down to the ground, Dustin Poirier is not capable of really hanging with Islam Makhachev. And I think if it goes down there, Islam will be able to get the finish. The problem is that I don't see any way shy of Dustin finishing Islam early that he will not be constantly returned to the cage. Khabib constantly got Dustin to the cage. Charles Oliveira constantly got Dustin to the cage. Benoit Saint-Denis even got Dustin pressured to the cage. The only difference is that Benoit Saint-Denis got knocked out against the cage, obviously, and Charles Oliveira and Khabib did not. But Islam Makhachev and Benoit Saint-Denis are very different fighters and were in different circumstances than that fight was under. If Islam Makhachev can consistently back Dustin Poirier up behind the black line, this fight is over, because he will eventually find the finish at some point past that line. And I really only think that there are a few other things that I do want to say. Number one is that Islam, as a striker, is still being underrated going into this matchup. He is extremely defensively responsible and one of the hardest fighters to hit in lightweight history. Dustin Poirier will have his work cut out for him, even though he is a much higher level boxer. The next thing that I definitely wanted to make sure that I got into this video as well is that Dustin Poirier has a much better ability to drown Islam Makhachev if he does end up getting hurt on the feet than really anybody that Islam has fought so far in his career. He's also by far the best southpaw, which I forgot to mention in the southpaw segment earlier. But all of this has not really been to dissuade me from picking Islam Makhachev at all. It's just to illustrate that this matchup, even though some people think that it's a free fight for Islam, I don't expect it to be easy. I expect Dustin to even perhaps be a little bit more aggressive than he is in a lot of his other fights, for the main reason that this could very well be his last fight. And that's definitely going to play a role in this. But I still do see Islam Makhachev having the tools to get it done against Dustin Poirier, whether he has to use the clinch, his striking, his takedown and submission game, or his takedown and ground and pound game, Islam Makhachev is too damn good to lose to Dustin Poirier. And Dustin Poirier is elite, so that says something about the level that Islam Makhachev is on. But I want to know what you guys think about this pick down below. I want to know what you guys think about the other fights on this card. Paulo Costa versus Sean Strickland, which I'll be talking about tomorrow along with the rest of the card. Let me know what you guys thought about some of the fights while I was gone. Thank you guys for being here and watching this video. Drop a like if you enjoyed it. Peace out. See you next time.